Good morning, WFNT.
Good morning, it's Senator Debbie Stabenow.
Senator Stabenow, Jason Cooper here. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us today.
Sure, I hope all is well. You have a good summer?
So far, so good. Can't complain. How about yourself?
Well, I'm good. We're finally out of session, so that maybe I can have a little summer.
Hopefully you get to enjoy a little bit that Michigan has to offer.
Absolutely.
Well, a couple of quick questions before we get to the legislation regarding the possibility of nuclear waste in the Great Lakes, if that's okay.
Sure.
I know it's been a few weeks, but you were pretty instrumental in saving Michigan $500 million to help combat blight here in cities like Detroit and Flint. Obviously, Flint, one of those cities that could benefit from additional dollars to help fight blight. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's critical that we support Flint and Saginaw and Pontiac, Detroit, all of the communities that are working hard to rebuild the city, rebuild the neighborhoods. And when the transportation bill came before the U.S. Senate, the Republican leader proposed paying for roads by taking back commitments to Flint and other communities for rebuilding neighborhoods, which made no sense. I was adamantly opposed and basically stood up to the leader and objected to the bill moving forward. And we had a standoff, and essentially he backed down and took the funding cuts out of the proposal. So it was very important that we have the commitments that have been made to Flint and our other cities kept. And there are plans for those. It's very important in neighborhoods. We know what needs to happen, and we have children walking by abandoned houses that are dangerous for them on the way to school, and neighborhoods can't rebuild when we have houses that need to be brought down, sitting in the middle of the street, where their whole block could be doing better if one house or two houses was brought down. So I'm really glad that I was able to stop this. It was a big fight, but I'm glad I could get it done.
Well, I was looking at a statement from Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, and he talked about the team effort involved in that, and you got some bipartisan help. It looked like Governor Snyder flew down to Michigan to personally lobby. Also, Senators Rob Portman and Brown from Ohio, so it looks like you had some Republican help there.
Well, we had the governor stepped in, which was terrific. Certainly, also Senator Peters was right there with me. Mm-hmm. Congressman Kildee spoke out from the House side, even though this was actually in the Senate, but he spoke out. So that was great. And Rob Portman and Sherrod Brown from Ohio did join in the amendment that I offered to take it out. So it was great.
Well, I want to move on to a different topic, a topic that's been talked about a great deal, and that has been the Iran nuclear deal. Some high-profile Democrats, including a colleague of yours, Chuck Schumer, coming out recently and saying they will oppose the deal. President Obama just a couple of days ago saying U.S. credibility is on the line if Congress rejects the deal. Last I looked, it looked like you were still mulling things over. Can you tell our listeners kind of where you're at on the Iran deal?
Sure. Well, this is very, very important and very complicated. I mean, Iran is a state sponsor of terror around the region and certainly a threat to the United States. The only thing that would make it worse is if they had a nuclear weapon. So this negotiated agreement with other countries in the world is to make sure they can't get a nuclear weapon. And so I'm looking at all the details. I've been talking to the leaders from Russia, China, in Europe who were party to the agreement to get their feelings about it. Could there be a better deal? What happens if this isn't approved? So I'm working my way through that right now, but I think clearly if in the end, it's better for us to stop them from getting a weapon with this deal, then I'll support it. And if I feel it puts us in a worse position, I'll oppose it. And so that's what I'm working through. We cannot have Iran with a nuclear weapon.
I'm looking at a poll from the other day on Politico, and there's a poll out there that say Americans are saying Iran got more in the nuclear deal. Are you looking at the polls and what maybe your constituents here in Michigan and um, residents of America are saying in this deal?
Well, certainly I listen to people in Michigan, and there's no question
Sure.
about it. I've been in many meetings and will continue to be. There's a lot of emotion, a lot of fear about what's happening with Iran. Israel, right next door to Iran, is in a great jeopardy depending on what Iran does and how we can stop them from getting a nuclear weapon, as well as the other terrorist activities in the region, what's happening with others around the region. So all of that's very, very important to me. I think the polls are difficult on this because we're getting information in classified settings that are much more in detail than, of course, are being able to be given in the media. And so in the end, this has to be listening to everyone and then making what I believe is the best judgment for us in Michigan, for our families, as well as for our allies. And certainly Israel's at the top of the list because they as America, are the ones that the Iranian extremists are going after all the time.
Well, I appreciate you answering those, and I'm sure we'll be talking about those when you guys head back to D.C.
Sure.
I guess let's stay with nuclear discussions because there's a lot of talk about the possibility of nuclear waste being buried in Lake Huron and possibly affecting the Great Lakes. Tell our listeners a little bit about what's going on there.
Well, we have a situation where Canada is looking at putting nuclear waste, storing it next to Lake Huron at a facility that they have. They've done a study. They've not yet made a final decision. It's low, as they categorize it, low and medium level nuclear waste. We've had great concern. People in the state have been speaking out. Those of us who represent the state in Congress have been speaking out, urging the Canadians to look for something not as close to the lakes. I mean, they have a lot of land, a lot of options other than being right next to Lake Huron. And so we've also asked the State Department to get involved. And in my research, I found there's actually a 1909 boundary waters treaty between the U.S. and Canada that sets up a process when there are disputes about issues relating to the water. And this really is about the water. It's about water quality and risk to the water. And it sets up a way for the State Department to get involved and require that there be a joint study. There's a group right now that is a U.S.-Canadian international group that oversees decisions, makes recommendations, studies risk to the waters. We can require them to do a study, a joint study, and then negotiate with Canada and create a situation where they have to look at other alternatives. And so I've got legislation that we'll be introducing. Senator Peters is joining me. We'll be introducing it in September that would require that our State Department use this waters treaty in order to be able to trigger this process to negotiate with Canada.
Well, I was surprised when I read a little bit about the Boundary Waters Act of 1909. I mean, that's going back quite a bit, and I'm sure maybe those negotiating in Canada probably thought the same thing.
Well, it is something that's been in the books a long time. It's not used a lot, but it makes perfect sense in this situation when there's a lot of concern on our side of Lake Huron, certainly
Sure.
in Michigan and others. It's a way to get everyone to come to the table and look at a process for making a decision about this, because when we put something next to the waters, it certainly affects Canada, and when they put something next to the waters, it affects us. We're all affected by the Great Lakes, and decisions should be made together.
Yeah, something I should point out, 40 million people in Canada and the U.S. get their drinking water from the Great Lakes. I was reading a little bit more, too, and they were talking about how it would be stored underground about 2,200 feet and then a cap with a 660-foot layer of shale. to try and prevent incidents. In your research and before you propose the legislation, what kind of an incident could occur? Are we talking like a leak or something like that?
I think the biggest concern relates to leaks and what would happen, unfortunately with the craziness in the weather these days, with earthquakes, with other things happening that have been totally unexpected, that something could happen that would relate to a fracturing or a leak. We also are very concerned about comments that have been made, nothing formal, but there have been comments made that high-level waste may be something that is also down the road, stored there or at other sites next to the water, and that's even more concerning. So this legislation would set up there's Article 9 and Article 10. Article 10 is triggered if they are focused on high-level nuclear waste, which would basically bring that to that decision-making to a stop until there is a study done and there's a negotiation. So I think when we're looking at high-level waste, we should have even more of a concern and a process put in place to address how decisions are made.
I should point out, you mentioned Congressman Dan Kildee earlier in the conversation about the blight, and he's going to introduce companion legislation in the House.
Yes, I'm really pleased. I reached out to him and asked if he would do that, and of course he has been speaking out and been a real leader in the House on this, and so we're really pleased that he's introducing that bill in the House.
And you talked a little bit about this yesterday down in Detroit, but today you're going to be in Frankenmuth speaking a little bit more about it.
Yes, this week I'm really doing a Great Lakes tour from one end of the state to the other. I'm now the co-chair of the bipartisan Great Lakes Task Force in the Senate. One of the effective ways that we protect the Great Lakes is by coming together with all of the senators in a bipartisan task force. And there are a lot of different issues that we're working on, from the continual efforts around Asian carp to nuclear waste to issues related to the pipeline up in the Straits. And so I want to update everyone on the areas that I'm focused in and also get people's input on what else we should be doing.
Well, Senator Stabenow, we look forward to future conversations about those efforts. We appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today, and enjoy the rest of your Michigan summer, okay?
Thank you, and you as well. There's no better place to be in the summer than Michigan.
That's right, pure Michigan. Thanks, Senator Stabenow.
Take care.
You too.